Hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast with Davis. I am your host, of course, Davis, and this is the show where I ask listeners to take their favorite talking points on hot button issues and draw them out to their logical conclusion. Because I think when we actually put thought into the things we're saying, sometimes it turns out we're not saying what we think we are. So I like to persuade. So there are hot button issues on this podcast and I'm actively working to persuade people, but I also just like sharing information and sharing ideas. This is a thought exercise, really, is what this podcast is. And I take a different issue every week. This week, I want to talk to you about school choice. It's on my mind. It's on my heart. I am a huge advocate for school choice. I'll explain to you why. And I'll explain to you why I think school choice is the Black choice and why I think it is specifically needed in Black communities. But let me tell you, let's start with what school choice means. School choice, the way public education works in this country is you're assigned to your school based on your zip code. And your schools in your area are supported by property taxes or taxes related to property. So it stands to reason that schools in a neighborhood like the one I live in now, cushy, beautiful, sunny, suburban Orange County, California, they've got a huge tax base, a very large tax base. They're very well funded. But schools where we came from in Gary, Indiana, which is 90% Black, something like 57% of the population drawing down on welfare, unemployment rates are sky high. There are not a lot of homeowners there. That stands to reason that school district isn't very well funded and their school buildings and their school system reflects that. So school choice says, well, you shouldn't be limited to those schools based on where you happen to live. You should be able to choose what school you want to go to. And there's different ways. People have different proposals to how to do that. Some states employ school choice, but everybody does it differently. I'm not going to get into the weeds on this one. This isn't what I want to talk about, but just to lay it out in a nutshell, there's different forms of school choice. You can do vouchers. That's what Indiana does now, where each parent gets like a coupon. Basically, it's like it's good for whatever amount of money. I'm not sure what the amount of money is, $3,000 or $4,000. And you take that, you put that on any school you want, any school that you think is going to educate your child the way you want them to be educated. You take that money and you put it on that school. You take that money and you direct it to public or private. If it's a private school, you can send your funds. If it's a public school, you can give them those funds too. You can choose to transfer those funds. ESAs, educational savings accounts, are basically the government depositing education funds into a savings account that is reserved for every student, almost like a Social Security, but for students. And then parents can draw on that for educational services only. And there's no cash exchanging hands. It's basically, the money goes directly from that fund to wherever you want it to go for your kid. And you can fund some of your homeschooling with it if that's what you want to do. You can fund field trips with it. You can fund a private school with that, or you can fund, some states allow you to transfer public schools, but there's a cost involved. You can fund that. So that's another thing. There's also just the idea of the money just directly following the kid, which they do in some Scandinavian countries, like I believe Switzerland, Sweden, Belgium. It's the idea that if the government gives you like $11,000 to educate every public school student in the country, then that money is on the kid's head. And then wherever that kid goes, that money goes. So it's not confined to a district. So these are, I'm not making a moral judgment on any of them. I'm just explaining what school choice is and the nuts and bolts of some of the more popular proposals. Different states employ school choice and different states use a different combination of these options. So there's no uniform school choice program across the United States. But the idea in a nutshell is that every kid and parent should be able to choose where they want to go to school, and it shouldn't be based on where you live. All right. So I became school choice when I was the director of an after-school program in Gary, Indiana. And we used to rent out our space to local groups we had a nice space. And if you wanted to rent it out for a little bit of money to do something, you could. So the first charter that came to Gary I believe was in early 2000s, and I cannot even remember the name of it now, but they contracted us just to provide the space for their lottery. Now, you may not be familiar with what a charter school lottery is, but typically charter schools open up, a lot of charter schools open up in depressed areas, and people are desperate to get their kids out of those schools. So charters will go in and open a new type of school, or a school that promises to be a different level, a different quality, and parents can get on the list. But the thing with charter schools is that there's only so many spots, right? So typically they are overwhelmed with the amount of applicants, and they have to hold a lottery. And it's basically just like it sounds. You kind of pick your names out of a hat. You have 700 spots, and maybe you've got 2,300 applicants. That's that. You know, people who didn't get picked, oh well. You can look at a movie called Waiting for Superman for more on that. And I also want to reiterate before I move on here, charter schools are public schools. We don't talk about this enough. Charter schools are public schools. They operate under the public school system. They're called charter schools because they operate under a special charter that they sign with their local government. And a lot of people perplexingly say that charter schools have less oversight. That's a teachers union message, and we'll get to that. That is a talking point. It's a very popular talking point. Well, they're not as accountable as public schools. Well, no, that's the opposite. They're actually more accountable than public schools, and that's why you're more likely to see a poor charter school closing down. And a lot of people will use that as an example, like, look at this charter school, it's closing. That's proof they're not good at educating students. No, it's actually proof that the system works, because it's almost impossible to close an underperforming public school. But a charter has a higher standard to meet. And if they don't meet it, they get shut down. And that's how it should be. I mean, we shouldn't want those bad charter schools just because they're a charter school. But it's important to note, charter schools are different than private schools. They're not the same thing. They actually are public schools. So, got that out of the way. So, they held this lottery at our space, and it was over 2 nights, and I saw a lot of disappointed parents, and I knew what the schools were like because I was an advocate for those parents, mostly grandparents. I had a lot of grandparents who were raising their grandkids, and I was an advocate for them in the public schools. They came from a different generation, and sometimes they didn't necessarily speak the language, so it was important to have someone next to you to go into those school meetings or those meetings with teachers, especially when it came to discipline, and to have someone who knows what your rights are as a caretaker. So I knew a lot of these people. And on the second night, this grandmother came up to me and she was just weeping. And she said she didn't know my relationship to the charter school, which was zero. I was just renting the space. So she was weeping and she said, "Miss Kira, isn't there anything you can do to get my grandson into this school? Because this is our last chance." She genuinely believed that was her last chance to save her grandson's future. She said, "I have to get him out of the school. You know what the school's like. I have to get him out. He's not going to survive there. This is our last chance. Is there anything you can do?" And it was really hard to stand there and watch that. And I felt as helpless as she felt, because she was really looking to me as some kind of leader, and I had no power at all to help her whatsoever. But that was the day I decided, this is ridiculous. I'm standing around watching parents scream for help, watching children drown in this inner city public school system that is failing on every single level, and nobody is doing one damn thing to fix it. And all they ever do is tell us they want more money, but I'm looking around and I'm thinking, where is the money? Where is it going? All we ever talk about is money, but no one ever talks about what's going on inside these schools, the things that money can't fix. That was the day that I started doing my research. Luckily, my father-in-law introduced me to a great organization called the Black Alliance for Educational Opportunity. Unfortunately, they're defunct now, but they were one of the first Black-centric education groups that was going around educating people on school choice. So I did my research and I realized, oh, wow, this is cool. There's all kinds of different options here. Wouldn't it be great if my students from Gary could go to some of the higher performing schools in Crown Point or St. John or East Chicago, some of the wealthier schools in like Hemet or wherever, like in the surrounding suburban area where the white people lived. Wouldn't it be great if some of my kids could go and get that education? And I didn't see anything wrong with it. I thought, gosh, everybody be in favor of this. Who wouldn't want? I got parents who are scraping together their last damn dime so they can move to the suburbs so they can be in that school district. What if they could just live where they live and send their school kid to that school district? Sounds good to me. I started bringing it up to parents and grandparents, and I realized, wow, they've been hearing about school choice, but they don't like it. They don't like it because what they would hear is, if you allow these kids school choice, they're going to take the money from your district. Your district's going to be even poorer. And we were already really poor. So nobody wants that. So people were like, no, I'm not for school choice. But when you explained it to them, most people were on board. So the school choice issue has a messaging issue for sure. And there are some reasons for that maybe I'll get into down the road. But I don't want to get in the weeds with any conspiratorial stuff or us versus them or whatever. I want to make to you the case. I want to point out the different arguments against school choice. And I want to make to you the case for school choice and why I think school choice is great for every American child, but specifically for Black and probably Hispanic kids. As you guys know, I don't choose to speak for the Hispanic community because I am not Hispanic, but I do feel confident I can speak on this issue for the Black community. So let's talk about the reasons for school choice and why people, and some of the reasons against school choice. Reason number 1, your zip code should not determine your educational opportunities. This is not a radical or revolutionary idea. It only gets painted as so when we connect it to the school issue. But Black people complain about this all the time, right? We're always trying to get, because generally speaking, although the demographics are changing, Black people still, generally speaking, still do live in urban and underperforming areas. Black people still are undereducated and underfinanced and have a lack of opportunity as compared to their white counterparts. So this is I know the landscape is changing and I know I'm generalizing here, but y'all get it, right? I don't have to break down every little thing. Y'all get what I'm saying. So Black people say all the time, white people don't understand that they have opportunities. It's not like people are walking around handing out opportunities. Just to live in a neighborhood where you're not ducking bullets is an opportunity because you can concentrate on different things. Just to have 2 parents in the house is an opportunity. Just to assume that you're going to go to college after you graduate high school, that's an opportunity in itself. Do you understand? It's opportunity of vision. It's hope. And there are a lot of places that don't have hope. And there are a lot of school systems who have resigned themselves to teaching without hope. And that infects everything in a school, from the principal all the way down to the youngest child. So we're saying we deserve to be in other places just beside this one place. And we need a little bit of help to get there. Not a lot, but a little bit. Some people are demanding more help than others, and I don't really think we should be asking white people for that much help, but that's just my opinion. But somehow when it comes to school, to public school, we feel that it is acceptable to simply leave our kids in a failing district just because the system has always been you go where your zip code dictates. We would not accept that in any other part of our lives. And not to mention, what it does is it creates a monopoly. You all know what a monopoly is, right? We're dealing with that. Is Google a monopoly? Your cable company used to be a monopoly. They could do whatever they wanted to you because there was no other cable company available. Your phone company used to be a monopoly. That was a huge problem. We have electric company monopolies here in California, and I'm sure you've heard about all of the issues we're having with that out here during fire season. Monopolies are bad. They're bad for business. They're bad for people. They're bad for capitalism. They're bad for freedom, right? because anybody who monopolizes a certain resource can dictate to you the terms of that resource. So public schools have a monopoly on your children if you go by this zip code thing, which we all do right now. But you would not accept that in any other walk of life. Imagine that the government said you can only shop at grocery stores within your zip code. You may not go outside of your zip code to find another grocery store. Imagine. Well, some of you are out there going, oh, that's fine. My Kroger's is down the street. It's lovely. It's lovely. I love my cashiers. I'd be fine. But you're the people who haven't been forced to live in areas where the grocery stores are horrible. I'll use Gary as an example. A lot of people from outside the inner city think I don't know why poor people are so obese. I get this a lot. It's not that hard to eat healthy. Well, you know what? It actually is that hard to eat healthy. There are what are called food deserts in the inner city. What happens is a lot of people don't have transportation outside of their 4, 5, 6 block radius. They live a lot of their lives there. They can't get to the suburban grocery stores that are nice. They've got to go to the grocery stores that are close to them. Well, those grocery stores know that 57% of the people are on food stamps. So they know that those people aren't really paying with their own money for this food. So they jack up the prices because they know the government's paying. And as long as the government's paying, and no cash is exchanging hands, you can get away with jacking up a lot of the price. Then they lower the service so that their overhead isn't as much. So they don't bring in fresh produce. They bring in the rotten produce, old produce that has been sitting on a dock, or maybe it's left over from somewhere. And that's what people have access to. Those grocery stores tend to be in high crime areas. So they're getting robbed a lot. They're experiencing a lot of crime. They can't keep their stores clean. They can't keep their stores stocked. Do you see how it's starting to build up? No, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to eat healthy when even their local grocery store is ripping them off from the things that they need. And then who's going to pay $4 for a head of lettuce, and they know that their 4 kids at home is not going to eat the lettuce, and they have to squeeze every cent out of their food budget? Well, you're going to get what the kids are going to eat: mac and cheese or SpaghettiOs, whatever unhealthy thing. You're going to maximize your food budget. So what if the government said you can only shop at the grocery stores within your 5 block radius in your zip code, and that's it? Well, that's condemning what happens to the grocery store? What happens to the grocery store when the cashiers get rude and you want to go in and be like, you know what, this cashier was rude. She told me she wasn't going to serve me because she didn't like the color of my skin, or she didn't like that I have 5 kids with me, or she just was mean. You have no recourse. That grocery store can be like, deal with it, suck it up. We don't owe you anything. We're the only grocery store that you can go to. So we're not going to change our service for you. We don't care. We don't care if you're not getting what you want. It doesn't matter. There's no incentive for us to give you what you want. We're getting the same amount of money from the government that we're going to get. We're going to get the same amount of money from you that we're going to get. There's no opportunity to grow or to change. This is what it is. You take what you get. That's what happens in a monopoly. We would never accept that with our grocery stores. We would never accept someone telling us, well, this is all you have access to. This is just what's fair. We're funding this, and maybe your grocery store just needs more money. We'll fight about that later. We'll see if we can get you. In the meantime, you'll just have to deal with that $4 head of $4 rotten lettuce. Why do we do that for our public schools? Why do we think that's okay for the public schools? Is it any wonder that our public schools are always failing in areas like Gary, Indiana? They have no incentive to change. There's no incentive for at the top. Teachers are a different thing. Teachers in the classroom are a different thing. They don't have a lot of power, by the way. These are all administrators we're talking about. There's no one at the top who has any incentive to improve your school. That's the school you got to go to. Deal with it. They get your money whether the school's failing or whether the school is succeeding. They get your money. So zip code should not determine your educational opportunity any more than it should determine where you can shop at the grocery store, or where you can buy clothes, or who you can buy your cable from. All right, point number 2, money. A lot of people say this. Well, we just need more money. We've always got bond measures on the ballots here in California. We need more money. Chicago teachers just went on strike. They need more money for the classroom. There is an argument to be made that teachers don't make as little as we think they do. And I have good friends who are teachers, and we will argue about this all the day. As the day is long, we will keep arguing. They really do feel like they're underpaid. They do a lot of work, and they really do feel like they're underpaid. And who am I to negate those feelings? But they don't work in the private sector. So they don't know that what they have is actually like a super sweet deal. Forget about the summers off. I mean, some teachers are like, you don't really get summers off. You're training. Okay, fine. Forget all that. Forget about the summers off and what that does, how that technically bumps up your paycheck. But they've got benefits that the average American would die for. There's no merit-based promotion in public school teaching. So you can be the best teacher or you can be the worst teacher. You're both going to get paid the same based on how long you've been there. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that's a problem. I think it's a problem. So forget about this teacher salary issue. I'd actually be happy to pay teachers even more if we could clear out some of the other rot that's going on in the public education system that prevents the money from getting to their classroom. Let's take Chicago for an example. The Chicago Teachers Union was on strike for 11 days. I can't stand it when teachers go on strike and they have those signs that say, I'd rather be teaching. If you'd rather be teaching, you would be teaching. There's no reason for you to not be in the classroom when the schools are open and kids are ready to be taught. Those parents in Chicago already paid you for this time to be teaching their kids. Those parents are trying to go to work. They're counting on the fact that their kids are going to be getting an education between this time and that time every day. What about them? I'd rather be teaching. Then go friggin' teach. I can't stand that. I hate that. Ugh, it drives me nuts. I'd rather be teaching. Do this on your own time. Well, Kira, we have to put pressure on the city and they won't listen unless we inconvenience them. But you see who's missing in this equation? We and them, not the students. Don't tell me you're putting the students first when this whole conversation is between you and the city. And this whole conversation is about making the city uncomfortable. Not one friggin' apology to the parents that are uncomfortable in this situation. Not one apology to the kids that count on being safe at school every day. And maybe that's where they get their only meal. And maybe that's where they get their only encouragement. Don't tell me it's for the students and then you've left the students behind. Don't tell me that. I can be on your side and I can advocate for more money for you. And I'm about to tell you where we can find that money, by the way. I'm about to tell you, so listen closely. But what I will not advocate for is you leaving the students behind and then trying to tell me you care about the students first. No, this is about you. And that's fine. That is fine. People do it all the time. In corporate America, people do it all the time. They want to get paid their worth and they demand it. And sometimes it causes some very tense negotiations between the employer and the employee. But we have this idea that being a teacher in America is something different, that the rules don't apply. So you're some kind of saint if you volunteered to be a teacher. It's a job you chose. Thank you. But it's a job you chose. No one came to your house and put handcuffs on you and said, you've got to be a teacher, You chose this job, so don't tell me that this is about the kids. This is about you. You're negotiating for a better salary. So just admit that. Just admit that. I'm sorry to go off, but it really gets my goat when I see those signs. Drives me so crazy. So Chicago teachers went on strike. They want more money. But just last year, I reported on a case where and this is just one of many stories floating through Chicago and every school district, but here's one. It looks like there was an investigation into the public schools board, and it turns out that there were several employees who stole thousands of dollars in gift cards meant for students. Here's one. In one case, a principal of the school for a vulnerable student stole presents of at least $500 in gift cards that were donated to the students and were intended to help address their specialized needs. An elementary school principal spent at least $22,000 in school funds for personal purchases at Costco and Apple. A district agricultural program employee used his meat processing company to sell eggs produced at the school for a profit. A principal used school funds to fund a teacher's lunch club featuring lobster, shrimp, and steaks. Families continued to use false addresses to get their kids into highly competitive, selective enrollment programs. There's all kinds of corruption running through the public school, but rarely is it called out. So the teachers that are striking in Chicago, they don't go on strike to rid their ranks of the people who are literally stealing from them. They go on strike to demand more from parents, because that's who's paying. This is why I don't believe in public unions, by the way. I don't. I believe in unionizing for sure. I do not think that there should be such thing as government unions. I don't. Because who are you organizing against? You're not organizing against your employer. Your employer is the people. So a public employee union pits taxpayer against taxpayer. And so I should not be responsible for those union. No, I do not think that public institutions should have unions. I think it's dangerous, and I think it creates corruption. And I think it necessarily pits citizen against citizen. You're not organizing against the Department of Education. You're organizing against the American taxpayer. It's insulting. Okay. So, more money. We need more money, Kira. Okay. I actually wrote an article. I've written several of these, by the way, and it was in response to a question from actress Jenna Fisher, who's famous from The Office, and she was upset that teachers were having to buy their own school supplies. That upsets me too, by the way. I hate that. And I'll go in and give a teacher, the supplies they need. But why are teachers having to buy their own school supplies? Well, let's talk about it. There's not enough money in education. We need more money. But no one ever stops to think about just how much money is running through public education right now. So I did a little experiment. By 2012, the national average for education spending in K through 12 is about 11 grand per pupil. So let's take that number. It's higher today, but that's the average. You can go to places like Detroit. It's about 13, 14. I think in LA, it's about 13,000. That number is about the same for 2017. It's the latest stats I could find. Although the actual cost varies state to state depending on their population and program. Kansas has a fairly low rate of spending, about $6,000 per pupil, and DC spends a whopping $13,000 per pupil. Ironically, it is one of the poorest performing districts in the nation. It's not irony if you know why, but yes. You may be saying to yourself, well, $11,000 per year isn't that much. College costs more. But let's take a moment to really consider what we're talking about. Think for just a second about what exactly it means to have that amount of money on every student in a classroom. Let's take an elementary school, for example. And I'm simplifying these numbers. They're way higher, but I'm simplifying them. If an average classroom size is about 25 students, it's probably more. But I'm not good at math, so I just used easier numbers. And we multiply that by the average spending. Well, that gives us $275,000 per year per classroom. So imagine your kid's classroom. Next time you drop your kid off at school, look at that classroom. There's $275,000 for the whole year. If half that is your teacher's salary and a quarter of that is rent, are you starting to see what could you do with a quarter of that in the classroom? For 25 kids for 1 year. So if you're in a school with 40 classrooms, that's $11 million per year to run a school. And that's a small school. $11 million. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Where's it going? Well, Kira, come on. All that money is not for the classroom. What about the principals? What about the staff? What about the administrators in the district at the state level? Those people suck up money out of the classroom. Yes. Thank you, listener. Thank you for bringing that up. You are so right. There is a lot of money that gets sucked up at the top. And I'm going to read you something that will blow your mind. We have allowed administrative costs to massively outpace the growth of the student population. That's what happens when you give the government the power to decide where your tax dollars go in education. Because people are people, folks. We're all sinful, and people create work for themselves. And the thing is when you get into government and you see all that tax money rolling in, and you don't see the faces behind the tax money, you just see the dollars. And suddenly you're like, I can create a position and hire my cousin. I can create a position and hire my husband or my daughter. I can create a position and use it as a bribe when I run for city council. If we could squeeze out the overspending and administrative costs at the top, spending on people who never see a classroom and never talk to a student, if we could squeeze more money out from that at the top and pare down that money could go to the classroom. That money could go to the teachers. That money could go to the school supplies that they absolutely should not be paying for. Let me read something to you. From 1950 to 2009, the student population, this is in Louisiana, is the perfect example of this. I'm reading stats from Louisiana public school. So in Louisiana, from 1950 to 2009, the student population increased by 95%, while school personnel, that's the people in the schools who work, that includes the like staff members, right? Support staff, janitors and cafeteria workers and aides and all that. So while the student population increased by 95%, school personnel grew by 386%. In contrast, teacher hirings increased by just 252%, which is still astounding if you consider that the student population only grew by 95%. But still, teacher hirings increased by 252%. Now, this is the stat that is going to blow your mind. From 1950 to 2009, administrators of Louisiana public school district increased by 702%. 702% compared to a 95% growth in student population. If any state did, by the way, California, every state has this problem. Every state. This isn't unique to Louisiana. Louisiana is just the most shocking. California has a huge problem with this. California won't even give you the straight up education stats. They're so bad. It's so hard to get information out of the government. If all we ever did was limit the growth of administrative hires to match the growth of students, that's billions in savings. That's billions in savings. If all Louisiana did from 1950 to 2009 was simply make the hiring of the administrative staff at the same level as the growth of the student population, they could have saved billions. These are people who have never seen a classroom. They've never interacted with a student. They play no part in shaping curriculum or innovating educational approaches. We're always being told how teachers are the most important public servants in America. And yet we spend the majority of our education funding on people who will never be in a classroom. So when you want to talk about the schools need more money, for what? How come no one ever asks where the money is going that's already there? We're just assuming that it's going to teachers, and everybody loves teachers. Who's going to say they hate a teacher? We all love teachers. What kind of monster are you? They're the most important people in American society. So we're assuming that the money is going to the teachers, but it is not. And the teachers, by the way, are assuming that the money is getting to the teachers. They don't know. They don't know because it's not their job to know, but B, when they go to the union meetings, the union, fine for teachers union. I hate public unions, but fine for teachers unions. But let's get one thing straight. The teachers unions are called teachers unions. They're not called student unions. They're not there for the students. Of course, their branding and messaging is going to be like, we're here to fight for the students, and the students can't be taught well unless the teachers are comfortable. But they are teachers unions. They advocate for their clients, which are teachers. And it's always going to be in their best interest to squeeze as much money as possible out of the public school system. So of course they're not going to tell you that most of this money is getting sucked up at the top. That's not a sexy message, and that doesn't sell when you're on the picket line. So the unions aren't giving the right information. The teachers genuinely believe that they're getting this funding and that there's simply not enough of it, but there is enough. And by the way, shall we look around us? Look at your school district and think of all the money that the teachers have advocated for over the years. How many strikes they've been on, how many renegotiations they've made. It's never enough. Is your school still failing? Gary, Indiana schools have been failing for 50 years. Strike after strike after strike after strike. Bigger budget after bigger budget after bigger budget, and nothing changes. At what point do you look around and say, well, maybe we're doing this wrong? The money is there. This is not a money issue. We can no longer say this is a money issue. School choice creates competition. Competition is good. I've had this conversation a lot because a lot of people get nervous when they hear about competition in education. What? No, this is a public service. We shouldn't be applying, that sounds like capitalism. Free markets. We shouldn't be applying that to public education. Why not? Every time there's a competition for your resources, the products improve. The only TV you can buy is a Samsung. That's the only TV anyone's allowed to buy. How good is a Samsung going to get? After a while, why is there any incentive to improve the product, to add fancy new bells and whistles, to accommodate what the viewers are asking for with their electronic entertainment? There's no incentive there. You just put out whatever crappy product you want, and people have to buy it. There, if you want to watch TV, you've got to buy a Samsung. But when other TV makers come into the market and they offer what Samsung's offering, but at a lower price, what's Samsung going to do? Well, they got to offer more. They can't lower their price. Maybe they can't lower their price because they've got all the goods and services and all of that, and the middleman, all of that to consider. But maybe they add more to what you're getting to make them more attractive to you. Why shouldn't schools compete for your kid? Don't tell me education is not a commodity. We are currently in the middle of a debate about how we're supposed to be forgiving the student loans of kids who went and got their degrees in underwater basket weaving. Education is a commodity. We are paying for it. We are arguing about money. Education is a commodity. So let's throw that away. Of course it's a commodity. What is the point of an education? A point of an education, the reason why we have a public system, is to educate the public at large so that we create more wage earners, which in turn creates more taxpayers, which in turn funds the government. So you are damn right, it's a commodity. And why shouldn't the schools have to compete for your kid's mind? Your kid's valuable. They're going to be supporting the government of the United States someday with their work if they do it right. Hell yeah, they're a commodity. Treat them as such. Compete for their minds. If this school over here offers special classes geared towards autistic kids, then that's who they should compete for. You should be able to say, you know what, I like my public school here, but this private school, they have programs for autistic boys ages 12 to 13, and they're specifically tailored. Oh, I like my private school, but you know what? This public school over here has an amazing science program, and my daughter wants to go into the STEM fields. So I'm going to send her there. What's wrong with competition? It drives everyone to be better. In fact, there are many studies. Milwaukee had a great choice program in the early 2000s, and there are plenty of studies out of there that said choice not only made the opportunity for the kids better, it made the public schools better. It ended up improving the public schools because in order to keep that money there, in order to keep that butt in the seat, they had to change the way they do things to attract those students. So they had to change what they were doing so that those parents wouldn't move their kids out. By the way, here's another misnomer about how school choice robs public schools of funding. That is not true. Most choice program, not most, all, because of the complicated relationship between unions and public education and the way we've always done things, there is no such thing as a straight school choice program. That doesn't exist. I would prefer that, but I'm realistic about where we are. in this nation's history. There is room for compromise. There is room for compromise here. One of the compromises that has been made across the board in every school choice program is that public schools still get to keep a portion of the money, even if they're not teaching your kid. That is the God's honest truth. So in Indiana, they might have vouchers for $4,000 for the parents to take their kids wherever they want to go. But the state cost per head, per butt and seat, as we say, is, I don't know, $12,000, $11,000. Well, the public school gets to keep what's left over. If your kid is not in elementary public school number 42, and she's gone to like the church school or some Christian school, the public school is still going to get $6,000-$7,000 of that money. You go off with your $4,000 voucher, and the public school gets the rest. So they're effectively getting money for work they're not doing. Well, it sounds like a better deal to me, to be honest, for the public schools. So let's put that idea away. That choice takes money away from public schools. It actually saves public school money, and it requires them to compete for your kid, which can never be bad. Your kid deserves to be competed for. Well, Kira, I hear this a lot. What we just need time. If every school was properly funded, can you imagine what we could do? Can you imagine what the kids would be like? All right. I don't believe this argument, first of all. I've never bought this argument. The idea that it's just more funding. I mean, I did buy the argument until I became school choice and actually did my research, and now I know where all the money goes. But for the sake of persuasion, for the sake of argument, allow me to concede this argument to you, dear listener. Let me concede that we do not have enough money in public education, and we need more. And these failing districts like the one that I came from in Gary, if only they had a better funded system, those kids would have access to so much more. Those schools would be so much more improved, and we wouldn't be having these arguments. Well, okay, thank you. How long is that going to take? I mean, we're going on decades now. We're going on decades of this there's not enough money conversation. Whose kid has to be the guinea pig until y'all get it together to get enough money to the school systems? Are you seriously telling me that you feel comfortable looking at a black single mom struggling to raise her 5 kids in an area where there's shootings at school every day, where there's gangs in school every day, where there's drugs floating around school, where they have to wade through drug addicts and homeless people and violence just to get home every single day? Are you telling me she should just be patient? Whose kids get to be the guinea pigs? See, here's my thing. Sorry, I'm getting up on my upper register. I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to calm down. I'm so sorry, folks. You know how I get on this podcast. I get so passionate about these things. How dare you? How dare you look at these people? But this is the other rising that comes into this whole conversation, right? Because there's people who live in nice, cushy districts who don't understand. Those other people, they have problems because the problems are their problems. It's their parents. It's their upbringing. This is the other rising. It's just a faceless person. It's just a faceless person. So of course, it might take 10 years to get this funding. The teachers are striking for better salaries, but those salaries, I don't even know how you justify that. It doesn't even get to the classroom. Then you still have a problem with the classroom, right? Teachers are striking for more money, and yet you still have the problem of money not getting to the classroom. So let's say the teacher's demands don't kick in. Typically, they don't kick in for a year or 2 years or 3 years. Who's got time to wait? You know who has time to wait? White people in nice, cushy white school districts. Oh, y'all have all the time in the world. We'll figure it out. And in the meantime, I'll get Sally private lessons, and Billy can get private basketball coaching, and I'll fill the gaps. But everyone doesn't have that opportunity. How dare you look at people in a desperate situation and say, just wait, it's coming. How long is that going to take? My kid's only going to be in elementary school for 5 years. How long to fix this school? I just sit around and wait while you guys figure out the finances? Or do I escape? No, I'm not going to accept this idea that we're all just supposed to sit around and wait for the grown-ups to figure it out. The smartest people in the room to figure it out. Meanwhile, parents are suffering at a very real level. Students are suffering at a very real level. What is so wrong with letting them leave? What is so wrong with that? Everyone else gets exercise choice. Do you know how many public school teachers have their kids in private schools? They know. They know what's up. Elizabeth Warren is running on a campaign of shutting down charter schools. And she sent her own kid to private schools. See, all these people want exercise choice for themselves, but they don't want you to have the choice. I typically find, and this is the God's honest truth, I'm not trying to be divisive about this. This is the honest truth. I have worked in this advocacy position for 10 years now. And by and large, far and away, the people who are most opposed to school choice are wealthy, white, and liberal. Because even though they might not admit it, at the end of the day, what they're uncomfortable with is the idea of these kids going to their schools. I'm sorry if that hurts you or offends you, but I would ask you to really examine why it is that you feel uncomfortable with students coming from other areas, poor areas, and simply going to your taxpayer-funded school. If it's all taxpayer funded, why can't they? Why aren't they allowed to? The final point I want to make here, the final point I want to speak to is integration. I hear this is one of the most baffling arguments to me. And it's one of those that's just really made up. It's just a talking point. It's just a talking point that wealthy white liberals use so that their schools don't get desegregated. And what they say is school choice will resegregate schools. I don't even know what that means. I honestly don't know what that means. I think, and maybe someone wants to send me an email, I think it means that these people are assuming that school choice is like pro-private, and they see private, anything with the word private in front of it is like, that's naturally suspect, right? Because that's capitalistic, that's free markets, that's like greedy rich people. And so greedy rich people are going to want to, I don't know, allow the rich white kids to take that money and isolate themselves in rich white schools. And so that creates segregation. But that's like the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. No, absolutely not. Because if the black parents have school choice, then their kids just go to that school that the white parents isolated their kids to. Do you see what I mean? It actually reintegrates school. The American school system right now is the most segregated it's ever been. And that's not due to official law, because as we well know and are well aware, we fought a whole movement in this country to desegregate schools. So it's not enshrined in the Constitution anymore, but we're more segregated than ever. And that's because public education is attached to your zip code. And we haven't figured out a way to integrate the day-to-day lives of different communities. And I don't know if we'll ever find a way. That's probably a whole other episode on, tribalism, white flight, the idea of community. Like, there's a whole lot to go into that. But the idea that giving parents a choice where their kids want to go to school segregates kids, no. Even if you believe in the white flight thing, then all I have to do as a black parent is just like follow the white people. You know what I mean? They can't tell me where I can't go, because they don't have that choice anymore. I have the choice. Do you see? Do you honestly think if, let me pick Compton, Los Angeles, or Trenton, New Jersey. Do you honestly think if one of those areas gets school choice, genuine school choice, do you honestly think that the white parents are choosing to send their kids into the inner city schools? No, it's the opposite. It reintegrates the segregated schools of the lily white suburbs. But people don't like that, because we like to talk a big game, especially I find this to be particularly egregious among left-leaning white middle class and rich people, which is everyone likes to talk a big game about I'm all for social justice and I'm an ally and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to giving up your privilege to accommodate black and brown students, oh no. No, it's got to be something wrong here. It's got to be something wrong. Well, if we just give them enough of their own money, then they won't bother us in our perfect schools. We won't have to make them a part of our communities. They can just stay in their own communities. No, choice does not segregate. Choice desegregates. That is the most ridiculous idea that I ever hear espoused. I hear it so much, and it's like, that is absolutely one of those talking points that's made for just listen to yourself. Like, just listen to what you're saying. What are you saying? That if parents have the choice of which public school or which school to send their kids to, that parents are going to start segregating themselves. But if everybody has the choice, then everyone can just choose. If I want my kid to go to the Chinese school, he can go to the Chinese school. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about, well, the Chinese people aren't sending people to the black schools. Great, I'll go where they are. You know, I don't understand that talking point at all. And I don't understand the talking point that school choice is somehow bad for poor kids. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. There's a lot of reasons why the messages on school choice have been garbled. There's a lot of misinformation out there about school choice, what it is, who it's for. But I just don't understand I don't see any other motives beyond elitism to why school choice should not be offered to people who live in failing districts. My kid does not deserve to be a guinea pig for the public school system. Yours doesn't either. So if it's going to take you 20 years to get whatever that exact amount, that magic amount of funding that a school is going to get that's going to suddenly make it perfect, if it's going to take you 20 years to get there, well, guess what? My kid's only getting educated for 12. Whose kid has to wait while you figure it out? Which kid? Choose. Which kid? The black kid? The white kid? The kid in the inner city? The kid in the suburb? Which one of them has to wait for educational opportunity until you can get the exact right number to fund their school? Nope, not for it. Don't believe it. School choice is the black choice. Black people should be marching in the streets for school choice. It is a civil rights issue of our time. We are being confined, and trapped in failing school districts. And every time we raise our hand to say, hey, there's a problem, somebody tells us to stay where we are. Right? Your white liberal friends are all telling you, stay where you are. I love Cynthia Nixon. Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City. She was Miranda. You guys, I'm a Charlotte. I don't act like a Charlotte right now, but in my mind, I am a Charlotte. But Miranda was the lawyer, the redheaded lawyer, and she's a lesbian. And she married the head of the teachers union in New York City. And they are activists for public schools. They directly oppose school choice. They organize against school choice, which of course I am not on board with any of that. But here's the thing that Cynthia Nixon does that I appreciate, and this is why she can speak on this issue. She sends her kids to public schools in New York City. She sends her kids to public school. She walks her walk. You see what I mean? She's in the school. She ran for school board. Hell, she ran for governor. She walked the walk, and she said, hey, if I want to make my public schools better and I want to advocate for it, then I need to be in the schools and I need to be fighting with the parents and fighting for the kids. And that's what she does. And she put her own money where her mouth is. So for that, I appreciate that. Even though I totally disagree with her, I can so respect what she did because she's living out the vision that she wants to see. But she is so rare. Mostly it's people who live in really nice places and have a guaranteed amount of safety and who have opportunity. And they honestly don't know that what it is like to live in a place that isn't well funded and community minded and struggles with other issues like broken homes and underemployment, welfare, and the consequences of living in a huge welfare state. They don't have to deal with that. They send their own kids to private school. They exercise their choice because their choice is wrapped up in the amount of money they have. And the rest of us are just guinea pigs. Never going to be for forced school public education. I'm always going to be school choice because I believe school choice is the black choice and I believe school choice is the American choice. I don't think our founding fathers would be very happy with the way we have structured public education. I don't know how we break that mindset that we're in, that's probably a whole other episode. I mean, we're pushing up on an hour here, so I probably should just leave it here. But those are my feelings on school choice. I don't think there are logical arguments against it, because at the end of the day, here's where I'll end. At the end of the day, the thing comes down to this, and this is a question I always ask opponents of school choice. Why am I not allowed to choose? Why can't that Black mother in the inner city choose? Make people answer that question. I'll say it over and over again. Why can't she choose? Why can't she choose? Why can't she choose? Because when you ask it enough and you get to the bottom of the issue, the answer is always she doesn't know better. She doesn't know enough to choose. That's what we're looking at here, people. That's the real crux of this issue. A lot of folks don't trust us to raise our kids. They don't think we love our kids the way we should. No, it's true. It's true. It's true. There's perhaps I should have found the clip. Maybe I'll attach it to the show notes. But there was a years ago, 7-8 years ago, someone got a little secret footage of a school board meeting in, I believe, Minneapolis. They were discussing school choice. Of course, this school board member was opposed to school choice. And she was a white lady. She actually said it. She didn't even censor herself. She was like, these people can't make good decisions for their kids. We can't leave these decisions in their hands because they don't make the right choices. So underneath it all is this prevailing idea that we don't love our kids. Not the way that they love our kids, whoever they are. The people who aren't us. There's this idea that poor people don't love their kids the way that wealthy people do. There's this idea that Black people in the inner city don't love their kids the way that white people in the suburbs love their kids. That's what's underlying. And so that's why I keep asking the question, what's wrong with choosing? What's wrong with choosing? What's wrong with choosing? At the end of the day, that is the basic question. And if you ask that question enough times, the answer is always the same. We can't trust you to make the right choice for your kids. Okay, folks, that's it. Hit me up on Twitter at realkiradavis. And if you type in realkiradavis at Facebook, you will find me there too. And hit me up on the email. I think I still have it on my Twitter account. We had a big political kerfuffle over at Red State this week. And so I took the email down because it was just, I was getting a lot of hate mail. But I like to leave it up there because I want people, I actually do like for people to contact me and let me know their thoughts. And email is a great way for people to really expound on what they're thinking and feeling. I don't really answer Facebook messages. I see them sometimes, but I don't really answer them. So email is your best way to communicate with me. And I'm sorry if I miss a few here and there. I'm just super busy, but I love every word that I read, even if it disagrees with me, because it tells me you're thinking and you're engaged. And that's all I want. That's all any of us should want, just to be engaged in the process with each other. We're fellow citizens, we're country mates. We're not all enemies. White people, Black people, Christians, Muslims, people from the South, people from the North, people from flyover country, people from the coast. We're not enemies, folks. I know it's been set up to seem this way in the media, but we're not. And healthy debate is not the same thing as fighting. So let's continue our healthy debate and engagements. And this is how we figure out things, right? This is how we figure out what's best for all of us. So keep on talking. And I will too. Thank you so much for listening. We will catch you next week on Just Listen to Yourself. Bye, guys.